Last year it was Cronin to Louisville. This year it's Cronin to Indiana. It's not going to happen. Here's why.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Terms apply. Go check it out. Where we get started today is the rumors, of course, on Indiana's front, with Coach Woodson leaving, that they need a head coach in the next season. Last year, Louisville, it seemed like the Louisville fan base was like, oh, Mick Cronin's barking. He didn't like how the NIL situation was playing out, and UCLA had a under 500 season. They didn't make the tournament. They were stuck with a lot of freshmen who I thought I was very excited for. A couple of players have gone on to do good things at other places, some former players as well, and UCLA had a bad season. This year, Indiana has now been a team that needs a head coach. It's a big blue blood program, closer to where Cronin, I would say, grew up and close to home, close to where his dad is. And I would think, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Except after the game when UCLA beat Indiana in Assembly Hall, Cronin pretty much shut it down. And here's where I think Cronin goes with this. Cronin, one, is more likely to join the list, in my mind. He's more likely to join the list of young, recently retired coaches than he is to go bolt for Indiana. That's where I think this goes. And for any of those blue blood jobs, it's going to take a real perfect opening for Cronin to leave. And I'm not sure if he sees where that is, right? He has such a love for the history of UCLA basketball, such a devotion to trying to get UCLA back and consistently good, which he's pretty much done, right? Outside of last year, he's always gotten to the second round of the tournament. His first year was the COVID cancellation. So far, Cronin has been able to get his team to a Final Four in his first full tournament, get to a Sweet 16, and really the next thing on his list is to make a team that he believes is good, not a team that has underachieved, a team that he believes is good, which is this year's team, and take it all the way. So much parity in college basketball that there's no reason that a 4, 5, or 6 seed, which UCLA projects to be at a very best case scenario, or likely current scenario that UCLA as a 6 seed is, to go on a run and win a championship. And that's a whole nother conversation for this year's team. But the next thing to truly check off Cronin's coaching bucket list, as competitive, as feisty, as much as he wants to win, is a national championship. Now, I know he loves the teaching of life skills, the making these players into true young men and adults after their career ends. As much as they can make money now, as much as they can go overseas, the rare few that can go play professionally in the United States, let alone the NBA, he wants them to become model citizens, model people in society. But Coach Cronin is super competitive. Come on, he sits there and calls his players soft and delusional. We know that he is that guy that wants to win a national championship. So in my mind, Cronin is more likely to join that list. Now, he's already addressed that already. So don't get me wrong and say he's going to retire. No. I don't think there's any chance of Cronin retiring until he gets a national championship. But that doesn't mean he's going to go out on top. No. But I think Cronin, unless for some reason UCLA has had enough of him in future years and things go awry after this year or two, then I just don't see that how it's happening. I don't see Cronin pulling a Coach Cal going from Kentucky to Arkansas. I don't see him going to Indiana, all right? Let alone doing a Chip Kelly. That is not Coach Cronin's personality. That's not what he's wanting. And as he even talks about in his most recent media availability, each job has its perks, and each job has its cons. And obviously the joke against any LA sports place, especially in the college arena, USC deals with this, all the mid-majors, all the local California and Northern California schools, including UCLA in Southern California, they deal with attendance issues. There's just so much to do, right? On the middle of the night, you can go, on the middle of the week, you can go to Disneyland. You can go to all these places, Six Flags, you can go there, you can go to the movies, you can go to the beach if you really want to deal with surfing in the cold. And I know surfers really love to deal with the big waves. There's hiking. There's so many things to do in Southern California when the weather, even if it's not at its best, and when things are going okay in SoCal, you can do so many more things than at these other places where you're snowed in, you're ice cold, you got nothing to do, other than wait all day till 8 p.m. for the big game to happen. Here, we're doing things all day. And Cronin understands that, but he also has this hard, blue-collar attitude that says, hey, we need to earn being a UCLA Bruin, whether it's from the coaching staff all the way to putting on the uniform as a student manager, right? And players included in the middle of that with the assistant coaches. He understands that, and I think he models what UCLA's program wants to be and has somewhat brought back a level of consistency. And there's some of those teams with Steve Alford where we had some good moments, right? Brought some top recruits. UCLA was able to beat a top Kentucky team at home and in Lexington. Of course, it didn't end well later that season, but he brought some hype as well. The big thing is for UCLA, there's been a model of consistency where there's been multiple times in these last few seasons where UCLA's made a tournament where they've had a legitimate shot at winning it when they get in the tournament. They were too banged up a couple of years ago, ran into a Caleb Love buzzsaw with North Carolina who made it to the championship game and blew that championship game. UCLA was a half-court heave away from making the national championship game against Baylor. Who knows what happens there, as good as the Baylor Bears were in 2021. Ride the ship when everything was going not the best in year one at UCLA, got them red hot at the end of the tournament, put the selection committee in a tough spot, right? Put them, all right, here we go. This team's red hot, did the same thing the next year. And other than last year, this is the team you expect, maybe in a tournament scenario, to give the opponent's life a rough time on offense, make it a living hell. And those players generally adopt that attitude. So as much as the Indiana fans are going to sit here, okay, Mick Cronin, it makes it. Last year, Louisville, it's going to come back. Bring him back to Louisville. It makes so much sense. I think it makes a little less sense for him to go to Indiana. Probably a little less to build up. There's tradition. I think he'd adopt the red and white easily out there in Bloomington. They've already got one very brash head coach. Could they handle a basketball coach with the same mentality, right? Can he follow in the footsteps and the ghosts of Bobby Knight? I think Cronin fits UCLA a little bit better. He's sometimes a little bold, a little brash, likes to run his mouth a little bit, whether it be at the officials, at his players, to the media. He's a quotable guy, and he fits the LA media scene much better than Lincoln Riley does at USC. Let's be real. This guy tells you what he thinks and how he feels, as opposed to Lincoln Riley, who will close up shop and not make the most information available or just think that you're an idiot for asking questions. No. Mick Cronin fits the media lifestyle, understands it, and can, with a win in a national championship, be on the verge of being a superstar. He's quotable. He's well-known. But Dan Hurley's the biggest a-hole superstar coach at the moment, and he acts like it. I'm not sure Cronin would be that, but he wants to win that championship. You could argue he thinks he's better. Who knows? That's not what he's ever said, but that's me just interpreting different things, all right? But until he wins it, I don't see there's any reason he leaves UCLA, Mick Cronin, until he either is retired or fired. And he's more likely to retire young than he is to be fired until things go terribly, because things can go bad in the next few years in NIL, portal. It's a year-by-year process. And if you have 2 or 3 bad years, he's already talked about it after the most recent presser against Indiana. The boards, everybody talks crap on how Cronin handles this team. Okay, fire Cronin. I've seen that. Let's calm down, pump the brakes, and the team has righted the ship. And I think he's going to be at UCLA for the long haul. And the long haul at the moment in this college landscape is the next 5 years. I'm not talking 10, 15 years. I'm not talking him being the next Tom Izzo for the next 20 years. No, long haul at this moment until we see how the college landscape goes out, if he really wants to deal with the daily rigors of Big Ten life again and again and again, is the next 5 years. And that's one full 4-year recruiting class and another. All right, finishing off the freshman this year and getting another 4-year guy. I believe Cronin's a UCLA Bruin, and I do believe he will win the next UCLA National Championship and raise number 12. I believe Mick Cronin can do that. This year or not, that is a whole discussion and a story still waiting to be told. Next, we'll talk about this year's team because they have got quite a tough situation. Can they hop up in the Big Ten standings? A unique Minnesota matchup, waiting for the Bruins to win it, but still a tough one at home, which will test their health and their big men. Next on Locked On UCLA. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you stay in on the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, why not go check it out with the same game parlay, all right? And hey, you get paid instantly. The app's super easy to use. Here's what the offer that FanDuel is offering now. New FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Again, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com at your shot for $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, here we go. Segment 2. What is UCLA doing right now? They are winners of like 8 of the last 9. Lost the Illinois game, and now one of Illinois' big men is hurt. Illinois was as healthy as they've been in recent weeks when they played UCLA, as energetic of a crowd. They were last week. They hosted UCLA, Michigan State, had nights honoring really recent Illinois stars, whether it's retiring numbers, Kofi Coburn nights. They had everything to bring out the most energetic fans in Champaign to whether it was utter insults at the Bruins, bring the energy, bring it all to UCLA, and when Michigan State came to town. Now, Illinois is still a couple games behind UCLA, and I don't think the Bruins are going to lose 2 more games. They have a losable one at Purdue. They've got very tough matchups. You can't look past Minnesota, certainly not Ohio State. It's easily losable at Northwestern, and SC would love to ruin UCLA seeding a little bit by coming to Pauley Pavilion and giving UCLA a dose of their own medicine, because UCLA has not really been able to sweep both matchups in the UCLA-SC rivalry since Mick Cronin's been in coach, let alone a Big Ten tourney. So UCLA sits there in the Big Ten standings on the outside looking in of a top 4 seed. I'm pulling this up on my own end right now. The Big Ten standings. All right, this is where they sit. You got Michigan at the top, 12-2. Michigan, in my mind, has been the most impressive, scariest matchup, and will be the most entertaining team. And if you want to have the best bracket come March, it's going to depend on how well you guess the Michigan schools going far. Michigan, Michigan State. If you believe in Dusty May, if you believe in Tom Izzo, your bracket is going to go as far as how well you guess those 2 schools going deep in the NCAA tournament. So Michigan is all by themselves, 12-2. You got Michigan State, 11-3. I'm pretty sure those 2 schools do play soon, so we'll see a separation or, again, clumping together of the top teams in the Big Ten pretty soon. Michigan State's in second at 11-3. You've got Purdue at 11-4. Wisconsin, after their big win recently, they're 10-4 in 4th place, which is crucial. Maryland, 10-5. UCLA, 10-5. And everybody after UCLA and Maryland and Wisconsin is 2 losses behind in the loss column. Nebraska's even further, Ohio State. All those teams are a lot further. So we don't have to worry about the Illinois loss hurting UCLA in the standings unless they go on a rough losing streak to end the season. What the Bruins have to worry about is, can Maryland, who is playing as great a basketball as one can play, the Terps have won 3 of their last 3 games in a row. They're 8-2 in their last 10. Wisconsin's won 4 in a row. They're 8-2 in their last 10. UCLA has won 8 of their last 9 games. They're 8-2. So unfortunately, all the teams UCLA is trying to catch up right now, and the top 5 positions above UCLA have all gone either 8-2 in their last 10 games or 7-3 like Michigan State and Purdue. Now, the fact that Michigan State and Purdue have lost 1 more game than the Bruins puts UCLA a game behind Purdue. It's still a game to play in West Lafayette. And 2 games behind Michigan State with still very tough games for the Spartans, and UCLA has the tiebreaker. Now, it's a tall order, I think, for UCLA to go out and win the rest of these Big Ten games and say, hey, we're going to jump into the 4 seed, which is the double bye portion of the Big Ten tournament. And what's a big deal about that? You play in the double bye your top 4 seed. That means you only have to play 3 games to win the Big Ten tournament. You lose early in the Big Ten tournament, then you don't have an ugly loss on your resume that even tempts the selection committee of putting you down the line. UCLA seems set on an upper mid-tier seed, 6-ish, and playing in the West Coast, on the West Regional, on the West Coast, right? Whether it's Denver, whether it's Pacific Northwest in Seattle, seems like UCLA is set for playing in the western side of the United States. The more they win, the better wins they get. They will do that. And then you might be able to play in San Francisco in the second weekend and have more fans than some big powerhouse teams, but a lot tougher matchups in your first 3 or 4 games just to get there. Now, the UCLA Bruins, this is what UCLA needs. To go undefeated, they would need Maryland to lose once and Wisconsin to lose once. And if UCLA goes undefeated with a Maryland loss and a Wisconsin loss, you would have beaten Purdue. UCLA will not only get into the top 4, they will be in the top 3 of the Big Ten standings. So an undefeated slate with a little bit of help. If UCLA goes unbeaten and Maryland loses once, then UCLA will be right behind Wisconsin, be a top 4 team because they would have the tiebreaker over Purdue. I have to check on that, but UCLA would have beaten Purdue and a lot of things would have gone their way. So if they go unbeaten, which includes a win at Purdue, who has struggled a little bit as of late. Purdue has lost 2 games in a row after being in first place. You still have to win at Northwestern. Northwestern battling for their Big Ten tournament lives. They are just a game out of making the Big Ten tournament. You've got Rutgers, who is the 15th seed out of 15 teams that make the Big Ten tournament. A lot on the line. I think the biggest thing is you want to play the least amount of games, have more rest prior to the NCAA tournament. And if you lose in the Big Ten tournament, it's okay. UCLA doesn't need to win this Big Ten tournament. They don't. But I'd rather lose to a good team on a neutral court than lose to some crappy team that just hurts UCLA's seeding. Not always the case, but a quad 2 loss on the peak of the last weekend before the NCAA tournament, before Selection Sunday, isn't going to do you any favors. As long as unless it's an NC State type situation where they go conference tournament all the way to the Final Four, right? Which is even a greater run than Mick Cronin's Bruins went on 4 years ago. Now here UCLA is a very winnable matchup against Minnesota. Minnesota is 13-12. They are 5-9 in conference, and they have one of the best scorers in the Big Ten, the 6'11" Dawson Garcia. Why do I emphasize the 6'11"? This is a game, once again, we will see if Cronin wants to lean on a Diamata. He shied away from it. UCLA has dealt with the suspected norovirus, where the team has gone through illness. Cronin, I believe what he was saying is the team is mostly done just barfing and getting through the toilet runs, the bathroom runs. They're done with that. It's the recovery where you got to gain those 10 pounds. You can't just gain those 10 pounds of muscle. Diamata spent a whole summer, whole offseason, a whole injury portion of his offseason gaining that muscle before he was conditioned enough to play with that foot. So it's a little tough later in the season with the travel that's already going to wear out these players to regain that muscle that you've lost. That's a lot of time in the gym that Cronin at this time, he loves to give these players off. Now there's 2 days off in between games and a big 4-day stint. If we see a lot of a Diamata, this is a good matchup. Can he handle the 6'11" Garcia? I'm not going to say he's way too athletic for Mata, but I'd like to see how that matchup plays out because this is a good matchup for Mata to play it big, test that out to when UCLA plays these big men later, or when he's in the game, UCLA goes on big runs, whether it's in Indiana in the first half when he played a few minutes and UCLA went on a decent little run against Illinois, but wasn't consistent enough. He was a little sick. And then when UCLA was beating some of the best teams like Wisconsin and some of these other Big Ten teams as well, we saw Diamata in the middle of it. Minnesota presents a player who is just as tall, just as talented in different ways as a scoring machine. If Mata can limit him defensively, affect this game with his rebounding, and score, then we'll have seen a perfect Mata game, and we can trust that he's back. If Cronin is limiting his minutes, Mata, then we'll find out if he's still sick 4 days from now when UCLA plays Ohio State at home in their penultimate game at Paul Pavilion in the regular season. All right. Huge things for UCLA. Minnesota represents a quad 3 opportunity at home, I believe. It would just be an ugly loss to the resume. Still doable. Minnesota has already beaten Michigan this year, and that's something UCLA can do. They lost by 19, and it led to a firestorm in comments from Cronin during the fire, right? Led to a lot of craziness during that time in early January when everything was going off the court with the fire situation, when Cronin was then blasting his players, and that was a different time. But Minnesota has beaten a team where UCLA would love to have gotten that win against a top Big Ten team. So it's not an easy win by any imagination, but it destroys the resume. A loss in this game against Minnesota would throw UCLA to the East Coast, travel some more, and they'd be an 8 or 9 seed, and you have to grind out against a 1 seed in the second round. Not what you want. UCLA is getting in the tournament. There is no situation, I believe, where UCLA falls out of the tournament picture. They're a lock in just about every projection, every bracketology possible. It's now about setting yourselves up for an NCAA tournament run. Doesn't need a Big Ten tournament win. You like to play less games in the Big Ten tournament and then get things righted in the NCAA tournament for a big run, which this team is capable of with a good matchup, well played, and stealing a victory. Next, speaking of stealing, I think these pollsters need to have their polling ballots stolen in the women's basketball AP Top 25. Like, what are we doing that the UCLA women are as low as 5 in the country? Are you serious? We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. All right, here we go. I was very, 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 very frustrated when I saw UCLA drop to number 3 in the country in the latest women's basketball top 25. Now, UCLA lost to USC. I can understand that there might have been some shift. Now, let's remember that the Auburn men have literally lost on the road to a top 5 team and didn't fall. Like, Auburn has lost, and they still stay as the number 1 team in the country. Now, they got some big wins. No, they just don't care about UCLA. Okay, maybe you look at the result UCLA had against Michigan State. Well, UCLA played without Lauren Betts, who was wearing a boot. That's a sign of concern moving forward. But Lauren Betts did not play in that game against Michigan State. I'm not sure if that's a Corey Close rest, and she's taking the greatest precaution at resting her players and saving them up for an NCAA tournament run, a Big Ten tournament run to beat SC later in the year. But UCLA had to battle against a top 25 Michigan State team where they did lead at half by 8 points. They led this game by as many as 13 at one point. Blew the lead when Sparty went on a outscore the Bruins by 10 in the third quarter. And UCLA trailed this game in the final, 40 seconds before its Mia Gardner clutch tray led the Bruins to victory. Now the players who UCLA needed to step up, Gardner played fantastic. 6 of 11, 18 points. Huge. She was hitting her threes, which UCLA would have loved to see her do against USC. But when her time was called, her number was called, made the shots. Janiah Barker in this game, getting the start, 30 minutes, 18 points, 12 rebounds, 3 assists. Now I wonder if Barker's presence and very dominant presence, does that put her in the starting lineup going forward or stealing some of Angela Dugalich's minutes? When Lauren Betts is healthy, if and when that occurs, whether it's one game or not, Betts was in a boot. UCLA does have a little bit of time. And then UCLA's next game after this Michigan State win, that was a scare. But if you weren't watching the USC game, USC was down 12 at Washington. So everybody was vulnerable. UCLA's next game after Michigan State is Thursday. So they had the Monday off, the Tuesday, the Wednesday. And Illinois, they just got in the top 25. They're slotted as the 25th best team in the country. UCLA has already beaten 8 teams, I think to my count, that are either ranked or receiving votes. Illinois would represent the 9th. And then USC is the one of the teams that UCLA has not beaten. So the UCLA Bruins, if Lauren Betts is not healthy, will struggle against Illinois. So you hope she's healthy for that one. A quick Midwest trip, last one for UCLA in the regular season, where they go to Iowa and Wisconsin, and the all-important rematch against USC, which will be for the 1 seed. So why am I so mad about this crappy polling in the AP Top 25? If you looked at the NCAA Selection Committee, which did have the loss to USC to consider for UCLA, the Bruins were still, by a decent margin, not a wide margin, but a margin, the number 1 team overall in the country. Overall. Now, it got a little skewed when UConn went to South Carolina and beat them by 30. Texas continues to build a top 10 resume. Notre Dame's gone to USC and won earlier this year, although USC was without a starter, Kennedy Smith. That's a whole nother reason. But Notre Dame sports some of the best wins in the country, despite a couple of interesting losses out of the United States, out of the contiguous United States. Notre Dame has a couple of wins. My thing is, how does UCLA fall behind Texas, who's 26-2, a 2-loss Notre Dame team? In some ballots, they're as low as 5. And I'm just like, dude, what basketball are you watching where UCLA can go play a top 10 team on the road, not lose? Why do you have to always drop ground every time you lose? All right. Every team in the top 10, in the top 25, has 2 or more losses. Most of the top 25, most of the top 10 have 3 or more losses. And UCLA sits there with one measly loss because it took a superhuman effort from Juju Watkins. All right. And I know I've come out and said, I think Lauren Betts is more deserving because she's played well for a large portion. She came out and tried to shut me up and did her best to do so. Even though I think Lauren Betts does a lot more to deal with the game and impact the game. You've seen Juju Watkins do something crazy. But you're trying to tell me that USC as an entire team is better than UCLA without the home crowd? Now it's going to be tough. And if UCLA turns it over 20 times every time they play USC, they're not going to win many of those matchups. And I hope a game plan and some switching, some coaching X's and O's, that switch would lead UCLA to victory, some better playing in the clutch moments after their first close game truly of the year outside that Michigan State game. Now UCLA knows what it's like to fail in clutch time when Lauren Betts is on the bench, and then they know how to come through in the clutch against Michigan State when they're coming off a loss, their best players are playing, and they pull out the victory anyway. Those are big confidence boosts for UCLA going forward. I just don't see how they're the third best team in the country. Yes, I know Texas has some big wins. They beat LSU. LSU is a 3-player team. UCLA is a much deeper team, and Texas has some pretty good wins. Texas has split with South Carolina. UCLA dominated South Carolina, didn't need a loss before to beat them. Like, ridiculous. So it's funny how the NCAA selection committee was like, UCLA is the top number 1 overall seed. And then they turn around and beat a top 25 team without their best player, struggled, but they did blow a double-digit lead. And it's like, yeah, you're just going to fall 3 spots. And in or 2 spots, some cases they fell as many as 4 spots. I thought it was a disrespect to see the UCLA women in the 4th spot. Go look at all the pollers. You can go to the AP Top 25 website, see what their voters have posted their ballots. And number 5, there's 2 ballots that had UCLA as number 5. I know there's some reasoning you can sit there, but I'm just like, what are you looking at? Like, what are you watching that UCLA is not a top 5 team? Now, do they have to prove it later in the year when it comes down to the Elite 8, to the Sweet 16, and you play some really good teams and the going gets tough? Yeah, UCLA's got to prove that. They have not done anything like a big run in the tournament under Corey Close. They have not overachieved under this current regime of Corey Close. Never they overachieved. They have not. They have always underachieved. But right now, the resume, the eye test, I think the numbers almost back it up. Even when they play badly, they are still not just the top 5 team in the country, not just the number 4 team in the country. They are the best team in the country. And yes, I can understand a 2 ranking or maybe 3-11. But the fact that they're number 4 or 5 in some ballots, my goodness. What are you watching? Yes, those other teams are really good. They've also taken some losses. Now, there's been hurt, but UCLA's been able to win games against good teams without their All-American point guard, without Lauren Betts. And some of these people putting in, like, they're covering teams that they've watched UCLA beat on a neutral court across the country by double digits, leading the whole game for 40 minutes. What? Ridiculous. I hope UCLA puts this to bed in a few weeks. Now, it'll only get worse if they do lose to USC. If they do lose to USC at home in Pauley Pavilion, won't be nice. Although I have kind of predicted in my mind these 2 teams will meet and then they'll play a week later in the Big Ten tournament at some point, or maybe in the NCAA tournament if they don't meet in the Big Ten tournament, and UCLA would win the home game and possibly, dare I say probably, the tournament game? Maybe. But I do think UCLA is poised to win that home game, and they must. Otherwise, they have no claim to the number 1 seed because other teams would have the same amount of losses and now even more deserving wins at that point. There's 7 to 8 teams that can win the national championship, but there's only 4 or 5 that can claim a number 1 seed, and UCLA's got a firm grip. It's loosening, and the pollers, the AP Top 25 pollers, seem to think the same thing, and I just completely disagree. Like, you put them as a 5 seed. You're telling me the UCLA women right now, that would mean they're a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Ridiculous. Before we're mad, I'm going to have to stop talking. Stop talking. I'm already frustrated. Take me off all day. All day on my vacation day. Whatever. In the meantime, we're going to hands up Bruins fans for an 8 clap. We're going to react to the UCLA Minnesota game. After that game, it's a 7:30 tip at Pauley Pavilion. So prepare to see how a Diamara plays. If he plays a lot, then I would hopefully assume that he's still recovering from the sickness. If not, then Cronin is just missing something. I don't know. But we'll talk about all that after the Bruins take on the Golden Gophers. Hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA. Fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.